Are youth gangs a problem in New Zealand?
I'd be tempted to say overall, no, they're not. But in certain areas and communities, they may well be problematic. Crime, the risks, the harms from crime are unevenly distributed in societies, and New Zealand is no exception to that. So overall, across the whole country, I'd say no, youth gangs are not a problem, but for some people in some communities, they would see them as being very problematic. But also we need to think about what we mean when we say youth gang. Do we mean just young people hanging around? Do we mean young people who are linked to adult gangs as prospects? Do we mean young people who are being antisocial or actually committing crime? So we need to be very clear about what we're talking about.
Are New Zealand's young people becoming more violent?
No, they are not becoming more violent. As we've seen, young people tend to commit crimes in the minor end of offending, the majority of youth crime, I should say. We can see from court prosecution data that prosecutions in the youth court, which would only be for the more serious end of youth offending, are also declining quite sharply. And only a very small percentage, sort of about 3-5% maybe, of young people who commit crime end up actually being processed through the youth court for serious offending, which doesn't necessarily always include violence. So no, they're not becoming more violent.
Is there a gender difference in youth offending?
There's a kind of general gender difference in that young men tend to commit much more crime than young women, and this is mirrored with adult offenders. Men commit the vast majority of crime in society, and women commit a much smaller proportion. So that's reflected in youth crime as well. Young men also tend to commit more serious offences than their female counterparts, so women's offending tends to be more minor than their male counterparts.
Okay, and finally, is there any research you think that needs to be undertaken in the area of youth crime?
Tons. The focus is very often on young people as a problem and risk factors, so it'd be really good to see more work being done around protective factors, to perhaps think about young people in a more positive light and think about the things that can prevent or intervene in offending behaviour, rather than thinking about risk, problems and issues. And that's something that academics who research in this area quite often talk about, that the protective factors have been ignored within this sort of risk management kind of, we have to manage the risks of various things in society, and offending behaviour being one of them. So I think, things around protective factors and also how they interact with risk factors, so we can get much more of a detailed knowledge about how those things interact, and maybe how we can encourage protective factors for those people who have a lot of the risk factors of offending. Also, it'd be interesting to see more work around gender, more detailed work around gender and offending in New Zealand. This is a failing of criminology as a whole, that it tends to sort of sideline female offending, so I'd like to see that brought more to the fore within the youth offending context. And also there's a lack of young people's voices very often in research about youth crime, so I'd like to see more talking to young offenders about why they do the things they do, what could have stopped them, what can help them, what do they think they need.